Let's hang out. 6.9 is parts of a radical and perfect squares that we're going to be working with. So the first thing you need to know is when you see a radical like this, okay, this setup where there's a number inside and sometimes there's a number outside, that number that's on the outside is called your index, okay? Often, so like if it's written like this, there is no number in that spot. Do you know what number is implied there?
0.
It's not 0, it's not 1. It's a square root, 2, okay? So if there's no number written in there, it's implied that it's a 2 written in there, okay? If you wanted to write the 2 there, you totally could, but you don't need to. But your index would be a 2 if it was anything other than the number written in, okay? This symbol, anyone know what we call that symbol? A square root. The like mathematical name for it is a radical. If you want to head back to the 80s, we used that word a lot in the 80s. Radical. That's so rad. Do people say rad anymore? Not really. Well, back in the 80s and the 90s, we used rad a lot. And then the number that's underneath this A is called your radicand. Okay, radical, radicand. Got that? So 3 parts, okay? If there is no index, it's assumed that it's a 2. Or you can write n equals 2. So if no index at all, if no number is written there, it's a 2. If you want to write the 2 in, you can write the 2 in, but it's never going to be written in for you because it's always assumed it's a square root. When you are asked to find the square root of something, we're going to assume the principal or positive root because technically, like if I said the square root of 4, basically what I'm asking is what number times itself equals 4? Anyone have a number? 2, right? Anyone have another number times itself that equals 4? 4. 4 times 4 would be 16. 1 times 1 would be 1. So 2 times 2 equals 4. How about negative 2 times negative 2? Positive 4, okay? So there is the positive and negative version of a square root. We are going to focus on what's called the principal root or the positive one for now. When you get further into your math career, you'll focus more on the positives and the negatives. But for this chapter, this lesson, we're just going to take a look at the positive one, okay? Okay, maybe the most important thing you do today is make a list for me of all the perfect squares. You're going to want to have this sitting in front of you every time you do homework, and then you're going to want to write it out every time you do a quiz or a test, just so you can see those numbers and figure out which ones you need to use. Oftentimes people are like, but I don't know them all. But here's the thing, you do know them all. And if you have a calculator sitting in front of you, it's very easy to know them all. The perfect squares, the list of the perfect squares. Basically what we're saying is 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared, right? So what is 1 squared? 1. So the first perfect square is 1. What's 2 squared? 2 squared is 4. If you don't remember that, you have a calculator. 2 to the second power, right? Plug it in. 2 to the second power is 4. So this is 1 squared. This is 2 squared. What's 3 squared? 9. What's 4 squared? 16. What's 5 squared? 25. What's 6 squared? 36. What's 7 squared? 49. What's 8 squared? 64. 9 squared? 81. 10 squared? 100. 11 squared? 121. And 12 squared? 144. Okay, again, you don't have to memorize those. All you have to memorize is the fact that we are squaring the first 12 numbers. This is 12 to the second power. So plug 12 to the second power into your calculator and you will get your number, okay? This list should be your new best friend for the next several days, okay? Make sure that you know what all those perfect squares are. And if you don't, that you just plug them into your calculator. All right, so you may use your calculator, or you can do it off the top of your head if you know it. What is the square root then? So if this number has been squared to become 81, the square root undoes that. So essentially we're saying what times itself equals 81, and it is 9, right? 81 is 9 squared. So your square root of 81 is 9. Does anyone know the square root of 484 off the top of your head? I did not. I plugged it into my calculator. Is it? No, it's not 24. It's 22, okay? Do you know how to plug a square root into your calculator? Second, and then the x squared button? Yes. Can you wait till we're done with this? Yeah, okay. So if you plug that into your calculator, you get 22, okay? What's the square root of 64? Plug it into your calculator if you don't know it. Second, x squared is the square root of, it's 8. Square root of 64 is 8, okay? Okay, now this looks a little fancier. This is 18. What operation is implied between two numbers that are set right next to each other? Multiplication. So this is saying 18 times the square root of 4. What is the square root of 4? 2. So really what this is saying is what's 18 times 2? What is 18 times 2? 36. Okay. So 3 times the square root of 256. You can just plug that into your calculator exactly how you see it, and it will tell you. Or you can plug in the square root of 256, and you get what?
48.
Is it 48? I don't even know. I didn't do this one.
That's the final answer.
It's 16.
Oh, 48 is the final answer. Yes, that makes more sense. So square root of 256 is 16. So this is 3 times 16. Final answer is 48.
But you can still.
You can just plug it straight into your calculator. Yep. The difference with this one is there's a negative, so your answer would be a negative, but negative 5 times 11, so a negative 55. Okay. What do you do with 7, 8, and 9? Now there's this fraction under our radical. What? You could divide. You're going to get some strange numbers. Whenever there's a radical like this, you can just separate it. Take the square root of the top number and the square root of the bottom number. What's the square root of 1? 1. What's the square root of 16? 4. So the square root of 1/16 is 1/4. Okay. So what would number 8 be? The square root of 9/100. 3/10. The square root of 9 is 3. Oh, come on. So square root of 9 over the square root of 100 is 3/10. Okay. Any questions on that process? Okay. If you really want number 9, it's what? What's the answer to number 5/7? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take those concepts and we're going to take these radicals and break them down into their simplest form. And basically what you're looking for is, well, there's 3 steps here, okay? So they break down the 3 steps for you. My biggest encouragement to you is that you make sure that you do this word, okay? Find the largest perfect square that your radicand, your number under the radical, is divisible by. If you don't find the largest one, it's not wrong, but you just have a lot more work to do to get to a final answer. Okay, so if you start with the biggest number that it can be divided by, you're in really good shape. Then once you do that, you're going to take the square root of the perfect square and take it out of the radical. Okay, so you've taken the square root of it, the radical is going to go away. You're going to leave the leftover part of it under the radical. Okay, let me show you what I mean by all of this. This is the square root of 24. Now, if you look up here at that list that I said that's going to be your best friend, Okay, the question is this. What is the biggest number from this list that 24 is divisible by? From that list. Is 12 on that list? 4 is the biggest one from that list, okay? Yes, you could divide by 12. Yes, you can divide by 8. Yes, you can divide by 6. But none of those are perfect squares. You are looking for a perfect square that you can divide that number by. So I can divide 24 by 4, okay? So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into a perfect square and a non-perfect square. And I want you to always put the perfect on the left. Okay, perfect square on the left. You'll see why in just a minute. So if the perfect square is 4, basically what I'm saying right now is the square root of 24 is equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of what? What would get me to 24 with multiplication? 4 times 6, okay? Really all you have to do is go 24 divided by 4 and you'll be left with the 6. Does that make sense? Which one's the perfect square right now? The 4. So if one of them's a perfect square, you want to take that square root. So the square root of 4 is simpler written as what number? 2. The square root of 6 can't be simplified. You can divide by 3, you can divide by 2. Those are not perfect squares, okay? So we can't simplify that, so it stays as the square root of 6, and that's your answer. So you would just put a box around 2 rad 6. Do you know how you can check your answer? It's very simple. Plug in the square root of 24 into your calculator. Tell me what you get. 4.898979, a number that keeps going, okay? Now plug in 2 rad 6, 2 square root 6 into your calculator. Are they the same number? Yeah. Yes. If that worked out, then you're at least at an equal answer, okay? It might not be the best answer because maybe you forgot to take the radical as far down as you could, but this is equal to that, which is really good news, okay? So you can always check it by plugging both of them in and making sure they're equal. Okay, look at number 11. Here's your list up here. We said we want the biggest one of those that 48 is divisible by, okay? If I were you, this would be my process. I would take my calculator and I would type in 48 divided by. Okay, get your calculator, type in 48 divided by. Now look at your set of numbers. Is 48 going to be divisible by 49? No. Below that, a 36 has potential because it's smaller than 48. So you could right now say 48 divided by 36 and you get 1.33333. Are those divisible? No. If you get a decimal, it doesn't work. So then go 48 divided by. Now here's the thing. Do I need you to plug every one of these in? No, because some of you are going to have enough number sense to go, I know 48 is not divisible by 25 because 5 or a 0 is not what 48 ends in. Okay, so if you have the number sense to say, I know it's not those, then don't worry about those. But if you're like, yeah, I'm not sure, then plug it in. 48 divided by 25, 48 divided by 16. So plug in some numbers right now. Tell me which of these is the biggest number that 48 is divisible by. 16. If you go 48 divided by 16, what do you get? 3. Okay, so that means this. Your perfect one goes on the left. The one that's not the perfect square goes on the right. Which one was perfect? 16 is a perfect square. 3 is not a perfect square. So it's going to look like this. What is the square root of 16? 4, right? The square root of 3 we can't do anything with. So you get 4 rad 3. Now type in the square root of 48 in your calculator. You should get 6.928, and it keeps going. Now plug in 4 rad 3 in your calculator, and you get the same thing. If those are equal, you know you did it right, okay? I don't need you to do this every time. But if you're like, I'm not sure if I did it right, then check it. That's just how you check your work. Yasleen.
Where did the 16 come from?
The 16 came from this list up here. I was looking at what are my perfect squares? Which one of those is 48 divisible by? So 48 is divisible by 4, but that's not the biggest one that it's divisible by. So you want to find the biggest one from this list that 48 is divisible by. So you go 48 divided by 36, 48 divided by 25, 48 divided by 16 until you get a whole number answer. Okay? Did you have a question? No?
No.
Okay. All right, you try number 12 here. Plug in whatever two numbers you could multiply to get to 72 so that one of them comes from this list. Okay? By the way, it's always a good idea to first check, is that number a perfect square? So if you type in the square root of 72 and it's a whole number, that's your answer. This is not, but it's a good idea just to get in the habit of checking that in case it is. So take a look at that list, 72 divided by, check what numbers work. Did you find it?
Mhm.
What'd you get?
Is it 8.48528137?
No, that's the value of it. That's not the right answer. 36. Okay, so 36 is the perfect square, so that's the one that should go on the left. 36 times what gets you 72? 2. Okay, what does rad 36 times rad 2 simplify to? 6 times the square root of 2, or 6 rad 2. How'd we do? Now, John, if you typed in the square root of 72 and 6 rad 2, they should both equal that number you just told me. Right? So,
That big long number?
How'd I get what?
You want us to circle
I want you to get
6
this.
Oh.
Yes, I'm
I thought
looking
it was
for
just like
simplest,
whatever.
this is called simplest radical form. So we want it in its most simple form with radicals, not rounded decimals. Because this is an exact answer, where a decimal is a rounded answer, because we had to cut it off somewhere. Okay?
So I can't cheat this.
How did exactly what?
How did you get like 6?
The square root of 36
Oh, okay.
is 6. So you're going to get rid of the radical on one side, the left side, and you're going to keep the radical on the right side. Okay, look at your list of numbers, all your perfect squares. What perfect square is 63 divisible by? (63) divided by 49, 36, 25. What do you get? 9. Okay, and when you plug that in, 63 divided by 9, you get what number? 7. So that's these two numbers. 9 times 7 is going to get us that 63. What does that simplify to? What is the square root of 9? 3. The square root of 7 we can't simplify, so we have to leave that one in the radical. So the one on the right will always be in a radical. The one on the left should not be anymore. Okay? Okay, how about 14? What perfect square is 90 divisible by? So go 90 divided by, and then try some numbers. 90 divided by 25. 90 divided by what? 9. So 90 divided by 9 gets you what number? 10. Okay. A lot of times people get tripped up on this one because they go, oh, but the square root of 10, I can break that into 2 and 5. Is 2 a perfect square? Is 5 a perfect square? No. So even though you can divide it by other numbers, if you can't divide it by a perfect square, you're just done. Okay? So the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 10 is the square root of 10. Okay? So take the square root on the left, leave it in the square root on the right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try one last one. Number 15 here. You are looking for a perfect square and a not so perfect square. 175 is divisible by which of these numbers? This one jumps out at me really quickly. 175 is divisible by which of these? 25. Okay, so you type in 175 divided by 25, and what do you get? Plug it into your calculator. 125 divided by 25. What do you get? You get 7, right? So that's going to be the one on the right. What does that simplify to? 5 root 7, or root 7, rad 7, square root of 7, those are all the same thing. So I'm sorry if I say different words. I usually say rad, like radical, right? 5 rad 7. But this is your final answer. And again, if you plug this into your calculator and you plug that into your calculator, you should get identical numbers. Okay? Questions on that? Kind of fun, right? We're not going to do the perfect cubes. So we're not going to do anything with 22 through 36. If you want to try a few more of those, you're welcome to on the 16 through 21. But you also have a bunch of these to do on your homework. So if you want to just get going on your homework right now, you are